Prison romance. The sky was getting dark and the winds were 100 times colder. I knew it would start raining anytime soon, but even then, I waited for the man who had saved my life in the 4 years that I spent in prison. If my information was correct, he should be out of there in exactly 27 minutes, 30 seconds. Until then, I was free to recollect the fragments of memories of the events that led me to this. It would not have been an exaggeration to say that it was a rom-com in the making, except it wasn't exactly a comedy for either of us. It was for them, however, the villains in my story. 4 years and 7 months ago, I was accused of murdering my dad, Arnold Johnson. It was indeed ruled out as murder, but only I knew the truth. The weight of the reality and the sentencing was so burdened that I could not even properly defend myself. Despite my lawyer's various attempts, I failed to prove my complete innocence. Hence, I was given a 4-year sentence without parole. Thanks to my lawyer and the various proofs that it might have happened in self-defense, I was saved from the cruel sentence initially discussed. But when I stepped into prison, I moaned in distress that I should have at least said something in defense. The very fact that I was going to be in prison for 4 years for killing off one monster was depressing enough. But it was what it was. The only way I could get out of here was by either spending 4 years or being on my best behavior, bringing it up again in court after some time. My lawyer promised that it was possible, and I agreed. Prison was just as horrible, if not more, than what I had watched in the movies, and I intended to keep myself alive, sane throughout my sentence. But did prison want the same for me? Obviously not. What happened between my dad and me was more of an accident, rather than a thoroughly worked out plan to murder him. But it wasn't the same for most people here. They were here because they felt more at home in blood than in peace. And I, unfortunately, would have to survive through that. Getting shoved at and snarled at were common happenings in prison. Being alone was dangerous, and so was approaching the wrong set of men. Looking a certain way was a problem. Not looking a certain way was another problem. Before admitting me to the prison, they had cut my hair to make sure I did not attract any wrong kind of attention, aka any predator. The stories they'd recite were horrible, to say the least, and I was not ashamed to admit that I did cry in front of them, but it did not mean I could get out of there. Awkwardly, one of the 3 men patted my back. One piece of advice: stay away from the wrong guys, and you'll be alright for the most part. I nodded at him. Another said, make sure they never find out about you, son. Gotcha? I didn't understand what he meant by that until much later. They wanted me to make sure to not let anyone know I was gay. It'd become a problem. Not could, but would. There was a certainty in that advice. They knew what happened around these blocks. I was so horrified by everything I saw and everything that I heard that I would try to hide myself as much as possible. Which wasn't possible, obviously. My busted lips were enough to prove that. What did you do, you punk? One of them asked. What could he do anyway? Another mocked me. I wish that some guard would come and put me out of my misery. But it wasn't going to be like that. He murdered his dad, one of them giggled. Could have been an accident. Look at the thing. Then he pointed at me. And look, I didn't really know how to respond to that. It sucked that people who could look through it clearly were in prison. Bullies of all people. What could have hurt the court if they looked a little further? It was a shame, really. I regretted not speaking up. But my life as I knew it was about to change, and it would get worse before getting better. But it was a long road ahead, and I was a first-time offender. I didn't know that. Well, at least not until my cellmate, Eric, told me that. He was one of the popular guys here. He had his own group, and several men who hovered over weaklings like me cowered in fear of him. Well, not exactly cower, but they did maintain their distance. I had never seen them interacting without a pissing contest. If not for the prison guards, I could not say what those hands might have committed right in front of us. Whenever I saw them engaging so violently, I wondered what stripped them of their humanity. There were several people like me, several of them were bespectacled and first offenders, but we all remained at a distance from each other. Together, we were sure to attract more attention than normal, and that wouldn't be a good thing under any circumstance. But one stuck with me. His name was Aaron. He was almost similar to me, except he was slightly taller and bulkier than me. He served as a deterrent for most of the time, but sometimes it did not stop us from getting beaten to a pulp by a different set of men almost every other week. Join the group, those religious ones. It'll keep you safe, Aaron said. But I do not exactly believe. He waved my excuse away. It doesn't matter if you believe in him or not, but it's safe if you join the group. Someone will have your back then. Besides, it counts as good behavior. Are you in the group? I asked. He gave a tisk sound. Rather get beaten to a pulp. I gave a little laugh. Yeah, same, I told him. When he asked me who my cellmate was, I told him it was Eric. His eyes bulged out a little. Why? What's the matter? Befriend him, he hissed, and leaned over the table. He doesn't really look like he wants to talk to me, I told him, then informed me of this several times. Eric had rejected any kind of conversation with me. It was torture sharing the cell with him. It would have been nice if it was Aaron instead. And I'm not hell-bent on being friends with him. I remember that moment when I had seen Eric's group of men kicking and bullying a newcomer. That was a week ago. But I still remember the bored and almost nonchalant expression on his face. It was unsettling, how these men just liked hurting each other. I get it, Aaron said. He is kind of an elite here, but trust me when I say this. You have a golden ticket in your hand. If he takes you and me under him, we're gonna have a smooth time here. How long has he been here anyway? I asked. He stopped and leaned against his metal chair. Everyone was chattier than usual today, and it didn't help that Aaron often spoke softly. It was my time to lean over the table to hear him properly. 5 or 6 years, I think. 5 or 6? What did he do? Aaron grinned. No one knows really, but we know it wasn't pretty. When we were ushered into our cells at the end of the day, I tried my best to muffle the curiosity that provoked me to ask Eric questions that Aaron had so unhelpfully put in my head. Eric was not exactly unapproachable, but he did not look like he liked talking much either. In the span of 2 minutes, I sighed several times. I stole several glances at him too, but he did not look like he was aware of it. Well, at least not until he spoke up. And I am still wondering why in the world you're my cellmate. I'm sorry, I said. It wasn't really my choice. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. He laid down on his bed. Keep talking that way, and one day his sick mother... I was pretty sure I zoned out in the middle of this ugly ranting. Perhaps. That was why I said the words that I said next. Can you be our guardian? I'm sorry, what? He sputtered and looked at me in disbelief. Well, Aaron said you can keep us safe. What am I, your fucking mother? Well, you're not, but help us. Aaron only has a year left. I have 4. We can be helpful to you in whatever way possible. He snickered and turned his back to me. I have no reason to be troubled myself. I have enough as it is. They're scared of you, I said. No one is scared of me. Everyone's just trying to survive here. So am I. I swallowed. The more he gave me weird answers, the more hopeless the next 4 years seemed to me. It had only been 2.5 months here, and I was already going insane. The bruises littered on my body hurt beyond comprehension, and the only man who could help us was not interested at all. And for what? Eric, if you let me sleep, man. Then I shut up. I did not want to cross the line. He was popular around here for a reason, and I did not want to test that. The next day, when Aaron and I met, I informed him about the conversation. He nodded and shook his head at the right moment, but didn't really say much. Even though I did not want to say it, it was obvious that he had given up, because Aaron was the only friend I had made there. I did not want to see him sad. So I did what I shouldn't. When it was time for food, I grabbed Aaron's hand and dragged him to the table where Eric was, and his group of men were sitting. We had to adjust, but then we sat by them. Aaron looked more spooked than I did, but I could promise anyone that my heart was in my throat, and I would have burst out in tears if someone had so much as shoved me. I was not made for this kind of confidence. You dipshits, one of them snarled. What the hell is this? With nowhere else to go, I replied, and intentionally kept my eyes on my food. What food it was barely tolerable. It was the only empty table. It wasn't. There were several empty tables around us. Are you fucking kidding me? The same man said. It's alright, Richard, Eric said inside. Let's get this done with. But man, and only after the conversation steered away from us did I let out a sigh of relief. What I did was so dangerous that I could have literally gotten us beaten to a pulp. When I stole a glance at Aaron, he did not look spooked or upset. He was grinning at me. When I looked at Eric, I found him curiously looking at me. Later, Aaron would say that it was a good thing that he only looked curious and not murderous. That would have been troublesome. When we were locked in for the night again, Eric looked at me as if he was waiting for me to say something stupid again. I wasn't sure what he meant by that. Was he ready to beat the hell out of me and needed a reason? From a distance, Eric did not really look like he was in the mood for that, and I was not going to do anything to provoke that kind of reaction out of him. Thank you for letting us sit at your table today, I began, just as Aaron had suggested. I hoped it wasn't the stupid I was supposed to stay away from. Aaron and I will never forget your kind... Are you fucking stupid, mate? He asked in a perfect English accent. I didn't know he was English, but you really learn a new thing every day. I'm sorry. What do you want from me? I have told you. All Aaron and I want is your protection. Keep us safe for the rest of our sentence. Don't want anything else. No, fuck off. He laid down on his bed again and turned his back to me. Don't pull that stunt again. Warning you. What if I tell you something secret about me? I asked as my last-ditch effort. I did not care for any. I swallowed. I'm gay, I said. After that, it was a pin-drop silence. It was really after that I was once again reminded it was late night, and the entire prison was silent. If someone was listening to us, they might have heard my confession. And if they had, my death was near. So I really hoped it was worth it. Maybe Eric would take pity on me and help my friend and me. It would be nice, I told myself, even if a little pathetic. Really shouldn't have told me that, Eric said finally. After that, neither of us said or did anything. The next day when I woke up and walked out of my cell, I prayed to him. Maybe I should really join a group here. What was the worst that could happen anyway? It turned out that there was a lot worse that could happen, and no one had found out about me being gay. At least not yet. But today was my chance to get beaten. Right after the shower, I knew something was off. It was a rule at the prison not to be vulnerable around other inmates. If one of them wanted to get your hands on you, chances were that rarely anyone would stop them. But even though I did not feel any such threat, I did feel it in the air when Aaron and I walked out of there. And it was proven right when a bunch of nasty asses dragged me to a corner to beat. They had no reason to do it except for their amusement. They wanted to let out their anger today, and I happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. 1 minute into the humiliation, I gave up. There was no way I could defend myself against these bulky men, and I did not have the courage to provoke them any more than they already were. So what did I do when they started beating me? I let them have their fun. Simple. Some 5 minutes into their entertainment, I saw another bunch of men walking past us and stopped right in front of where I was laying on the ground, taking kicks like the pathetic little man they told me I was. Some words were exchanged and the beatings eventually stopped. I huffed out a little blood and my friend, Aaron, pulled me to my feet. I saw Eric looking over at me, and his eyes strangely looked upset. That pathetic little man is now my protection, Garner. So I better not see you around him or the other guy. He looked at the other man, and they exchanged a few words. Aaron supported me, and Eric told him to get me patched up. Without a word, Aaron dragged me away from there. I asked him what happened. Aaron then told me everything. After I was dragged away, he immediately went to Eric and his group of men to ask for their help. None of the men moved for several minutes, and Aaron nearly gave up. It was a thing around prison, try not to get into other people's mess. And for the most part, most people followed that rule. But just when it looked like they would not help, Eric got up and asked Aaron to lead him to me. But his group looked a little surprised, but still a little excited about the possible violent confrontation. The entire thing was so bizarre that I nearly scoffed. Toxic masculinity around this part of the world was nuts. But that saved my life, so I was glad this time. Maybe you should talk to him tonight, he suggested. I don't want to piss him off. He patted my back. Trust me, he's already pissed off. When we were locked in our cells for the night, I sat in my corner and stared at Eric. He did not seem to be in the mood to talk, but he did not look like he would dismiss me either. So with that little bit of courage, I told him thank you. He hummed and sat down on his bed. He was rolling his feet, a form of exercise, I believed. Maybe you should stay away from them. I always try. Rarely works out, I replied. Then don't be pathetic, man. Fight. I rubbed my hands together. The movement hurt my bruises, and Eric seemed to notice it. I do not like fighting. Eric scoffed. They say you killed your dad. I looked at him in annoyance. What does that mean? That means that it is obviously a lie. You did not kill your dad. Well, I said, and stupidly smirked. They did not believe that, though. I did kill my dad. That's the truth, I added. He placed his arms on his thighs and leaned closer. He was entertained. Oh, what exactly did you do, Jacob? How did you kill him? I swallowed. This was really the first time I was talking about that day, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to articulate any event from that day. We were months past that day, of course, but it did not mean time had wiped away the ugliness of that event. If anything, it had started to look and feel more and more like part of my life. You know what? He said and leaned away. I assumed he'd seen the look on my face and was aware enough not to push me. I'm done for the day. You're right. I did not kill him, I said, looked into his eyes. Oh? He said. Well, at least not intentional, I added. He was a very, very bad man, and I thought it was wrong that he was still alive. So when we were arguing, I shoved him, and his head hit the coffee table. Then he died. I shrugged. Eric scoffed. What? I asked. That's a lie, he said, and laughed, and then laid down on the bed. Fucking liar. I swallowed. I did not want to give away, but he looked like he had caught on regardless. Was not about to share anything of the past. What had happened had happened. My dad was dead. As far as I knew, the court had already decided my act was done. Self-defense. History would not know any better. You're allowed to think whatever you want, I replied, a little aggressively. Really? He kept laughing, and there were tears in the corner of his eyes. I was baffled. What was so amusing to him? What is wrong with you? Jacob Johnson, what did you do to your dad to deserve that? I groaned in annoyance. I've told you already. Did he beat you because you're gay? He asked, and he turned to me. Did he beat your mommy because she failed him? Maybe your sister. Was it because you just couldn't stand the sight of him? How dare you, I cried out. A hush fell around us. Eric sat up. So he did beat you guys. Just like mine did, mind you. I don't care what your dad did. Mine was a monster, and he deserved what came for him. I stood up. I was so angry at him that I could have slapped him, uncaring of the consequences. Eric was taller, broader, and bulkier than me. I knew I did not stand a chance, but I also knew that if I said anything out of line, I would get in trouble with him. Yo, Eric began, as if trying to provoke me. You killed an innocent man. And I jumped on him. When I came to my senses, I was being held back by the guard. Eric sat in the corner of the cell with a bloody mouth. He was going to be checked by a nurse, the guard said, but Eric said he had no intention to leave the cell. I nearly fell on my knees to beg for his forgiveness. I did not mean to get in trouble with him right after getting his protection. But if he hadn't said what he had, then I wouldn't have done that. Half of it was his fault. I decided it was a provocation on his part, and I hated him for that. The guard jerked me and slapped me a few times, then he threw me into the corner. He warned that if I did anything like that again, he would make sure I spent the next week in the cold outside. I nodded at him when he threatened to hit me again. Eric watched all this interaction in silence. All right, to bed everyone, the guard shouted in each cell. When we were left alone, I crawled on my bed and turned my back to Eric. I did not want to face him, hence the consequences that I knew were coming my way. I just hoped that Aaron wouldn't hate me for any of this. Jacob, Eric said into the silence then. Sorry, he added. Didn't mean to get on your nerves, but my dad was shittier than yours. Because it would hurt my pride. I'm not going to say exactly what he did. I rolled my eyes and nearly scoffed at him. You ain't supposed to compare abuse, mate. The silence after that was surely resounding. Contradictory to what I had believed and thought of, things between Eric and me did not get worse after that violent confrontation. If I could be so bold, I would say it got slightly better. Aaron and I no longer felt threatened, and we shared the table with Eric and his gang. Although the men hadn't exactly accepted us into their group, they made sure no one got close to us, even if all of that was done out of pity. I was grateful for that. Under their protection, I could say most of my sentence went smoothly. The actual hitch came when I started feeling something that I shouldn't even have in prison, of all places. And it started happening some months after Aaron was released. Now it was Eric and his group of men and me, and it was getting awkward for me. And I was not brooding in the corner crying over my messed up future and the kind of life waiting for me in 3 years. I was feeling depressed, stressed, and exhausted over the kind of life I was forced to live in prison. I had lost a lot of weight, my mom said when she came to meet me, and she was worried that I was not caring for myself. I nearly laughed in her face. Did she think I was spending my time at a hotel? Not caring for myself? Did I have a choice in that? I had none. When she asked if I had joined any other group, I told her that I was still thinking about the religious one. Over a year, she said, and still thinking? Then she went on a rant about how Jesus was sure to save me. I was not ridiculing her faith, but I was very close to reminding her that she was the one who had said that even Jesus could not save me when I came out to her. I wasn't really sure it would help me here. Even then, I told her I would. She looked happy at that. After Aaron, Eric was the only person I was close to. Oftentimes, we would have some kind of conversation during the nights, and I might let out my sexual rendezvous to him in detail. He always looked amazed. I was not sure why. Then he confessed that he'd been in prison for so long that he had sort of given up on the whole idea of intimacy. The conversation turned a little awkward after that, but nothing could have stopped me from reciting tales of my abusive family. Dad had always been abusive, at least as far as I could remember. His failed business and relationship with my mom just made it worse. And on top of all, his only child was gay. You were right when you said he beat us because of it. wasn't all, and I let the conversation trail after that. The further I spoke, the wider his eyes got. At some point, he seemed to agree that my dad had it coming. It was still self-defense, he murmured. I nodded. I could not have dared to hit him without a reason. He sighed and got on his bed. He gave you guys reasons for many years. Not arguing about this, I said tiredly. He raised his hands in surrender. Trust me, I'm in no mood to argue, ever. I grinned at him and sat down on my own bed. Do you reckon things can get better here? And then tried to pull the already stretched sleeve of my uniform. He looked into my eyes. Here? Better? No way. He gave a little laugh. But you said something. It's a cycle, Jacob. Things get worse, then better, then worse again, and then quite good, then worse. And that goes on and on. He lay down on the bed and looked around the cell. In prison, things can never be okay. Maybe tolerable, but it can never be okay. And the institution was sure to prove Eric right. Just because Eric had taken me under him did not mean I was all protected. There were moments in prison where I knew and I could feel that I was in danger. And not always did I tell Eric about him. I had a few rows with other inmates, mainly the new ones who wanted to establish themselves by bullying the older guys. Unfortunately, one of the times it happened, Eric noticed it, and he got into a little scuffle with the young man. I don't want you to beat people in my name, I announced the moment we were left alone one night. It was silent once again, and most of the inmates were already asleep. Because I did not want anyone to hear us, I kept my voice low. Not only is that dangerous, but people may start talking. What about it? He asked and rolled his socks off his feet, after smelling them. He made a face, but it wasn't like he had an option. That what you asked for? Yeah, but still, I shrugged, and leaned against his side of the wall. I saw the way they looked at you, and me. He looked up at me. And how was that? It's dangerous, Eric, I whispered, trying to get into his thick head that if they got a whiff of my sexuality, they were sure to harass me or hurt him. And I did not want any of that to happen. I had heard stories, and I did not want one on either of us. I twisted my fingers and peered down at him. And if there's nothing, they may get suspicious. He huffed. Exactly what, Jacob? It isn't like something's actually going on. And as stupid as I was, I did give him the reason. I immediately leaned down and gave him a quick kiss on his mouth. He did not jerk back or lean away from the touch. He merely looked conflicted and relieved somehow. It was almost as if he were glad that it happened sooner than later, for whatever reason that might have been. I was not exactly sure why I did that, but it seemed like the right thing to do. In the last 2 years, it was only Eric who had kept me safe from all the troubles in the prison life promised me, and I just wanted to show him my gratitude, if the kiss could be called that. Not only that, I could testify in front of God that Eric had done a great job at keeping depression at bay for me. If not for him, I would have long swum in those dangerous waters. But then Eric did not respond. I softly apologized and got on my bed. I turned my back to him and snapped shut up eyes. There wasn't any movement from his side, but then some 10 minutes later, when my body was more relaxed, I heard the soft pitter-patter of his feet coming close. Although my heart raced, I knew it wasn't out of fear. If Eric wanted to hurt me for crossing the boundary, he would have done that long ago. But instead, he sat on my bed, grabbed my neck to turn my face so that it faced him, and after making sure there was no guard outside, he leaned over me and kissed me, messily. It was obvious he had no experience, but his passion made it better, and I willingly let him kiss me. I couldn't exactly stop him after that. Did we spend most of the nights after that kissing? Yes, we did. In the coming months, we did nothing but kiss. It was easier to keep everyone's suspicions at bay when we had already discussed what the major flags were. As long as we behaved like regular cellmates, it was going to be alright. We did seem alright until one of the prison guards caught us kissing in the middle of the night. I assumed it was because we were a little careless, but what was done was done. The guard stood outside the door with his arms crossed over his chest. Even Eric seemed scared. It was indeed the first time I had seen him like that. Better not say that again, Eric Simpson, the man warned. Sorry, Tony, Eric said. Tony waved it away. Listen, mate. Cool that it was me and not anyone else, alright? Not gonna tell anyone, but you better be careful. Thanks, mate. What was that? I asked from my side, once the guard had left. Does he know? Eric ran a hand through his hair. Tony's one of us. He's got an inmate boyfriend. He stopped when I gave a little surprising yell. Eric laughed. Yeah, he is gay. His boyfriend's in a group with me. That's how I got to know Tony. He's safe, don't worry. I breathed out a sigh of relief. I got so scared. Eric laughed, but then spread his arms again. Come here, he said, and I did. But Tony wasn't the only person who had heard us that night. Someone else had. The word started rolling around the prison that the popular Eric might be a homosexual after all. But those were merely rumors, and a few beatings from his group were sure to end them. That did not mean it did not affect whatever was going on between us. Some weeks later, Eric said that he wanted to set some boundaries. What does that mean? I asked and sat up on my bed. You know what that means? It's to keep an image to survive, he began. In the moment I failed to do so, become one of those pesky little worms. I have messed with a lot of people. I can't take the chance. So that means, Jacob, stay the fuck away. Those were just words. 3 weeks after that, we slept together for the first time. Now there was no privacy in a cell of all places. We did not expect that either. And so, in between giggles, we slept together. Thank God no one discussed it after that night. It was almost as if no one knew. Despite Eric's promise that he wanted to take charge of his image, we slept together almost every other week. It was hard to keep away when we were so close. But that was it to our relationship. 30 years passed and we were still sneaking in our cells like dirty people. My sentence came to a close and I was soon to be released. The night before, Eric merely kissed me and promised that he would send me letters. I asked if there was no one waiting for him other than me. He replied no one had contacted him in the last 7 years. When I tried to ask him about his crime, my last night in prison, he replied that it was better if I did not know. Present time. And now I was waiting for him outside of the same prison, and I still did not know what had really happened. The only thing I got to know was that he was going to be released 7 months after me. But in those 7 months, he had shared several letters, and in each he had begun the letter with Dear Jacob and ended with Yours truly, Eric. And each would end with a little cutely drawn heart next to his name. I kept each one safe, but I was not sure if I had any left. He had told me he would have to burn my letters because one of his group mates nearly found it. When I saw the gate opening, I let out a heavy breath. He looked haggard when he came out, but still almost the same as I had last seen him. When he found me, he waved and ran to me. When we finally hugged each other, did we kiss? Yes, we did. He laughed into the kiss and I hugged him around his neck. Ah, he said, and inhaled fresh air. Freedom tastes so much better than I imagined it would. 10 years, I began. You think things have changed? Bring me somewhere, and I shall let you know. I smiled. Let's go to a cafe. Need something warm. Yes, I do. Thank you. He held my hand and practically dragged me away from there. We need to get as away as possible. Can we treat this as a date? He added. I nodded and squeezed his hand. Yes, it's a date. After that, he said, we can go to your home. I nodded at him. Conclusion. We did go to my home after that. Although things were better between us because we no longer needed to care about privacy in my home. Eric still had a hard time dealing with things after being in prison for so long. Regardless, for the most part, he did better than I thought he would, and I believed that was all that mattered. The end. The relationship between Jacob and Eric was based on chance. How hard would it be for them and their relationship to make it through life? Let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.